Good evening, friends and listeners from the Northeastern Service of All India Radio. We welcome you to this Radio Bridge program. And on this very auspicious day, the world and India in particular are celebrating the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. We don't need really an introduction to Mahatma Gandhi. He has been the epitome of social reforms. He was a true social worker fighting against the evils of society. He always said, if you want to do social work, you start yourself. He was very worried about poverty of India, and his political movements were also a type of social work. And as he would always say that you have to look at the eyes of the poor to work for them, because poverty those days was the main focus of early social work of Gandhi. And it is intricately linked with the idea of charity work. However, it now must be understood in much broader terms. Well, the topic is Mahatma Gandhi, an epitome of social reform. We are joined by panelists, and I take the privilege of introducing them. We have Shri Shiv Shankar Singh Thakur, the Assistant Director, State Council of Education, Research and Training, Arunachal Pradesh. Ms. Ruadiki Hamar, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Government Johnson College, Aizawl. Dr. Ravi Shekhar Vishal, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, Sikkim University, Gangtok. And Srimati Ning Tho Khongjam Sabita Devi, Senior Journalist and Columnist, Imphal, Manipur. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to open up the discussion with the opening remarks. Ma'am Sabita Devi.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. It's a great day for us Indians, and we are here to talk about Gandhiji's as an epitome of social reform. Your opening remarks and in the context of this present world.
Before I begin, I would like to thank the Northeastern Service, All India Radio Shillong, for giving me this opportunity to be a part of the 151st birth anniversary celebration of the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
The topic of today's discussion is Gandhi, the epitome of social reformer. When we discuss the relevance of life and works of the great leader in today's world, we feel that Mahatma Gandhi, whom the Indians lovingly called Bapu, the father of the nation, is still in our midst and will remain a part of the generations to come. There is little surprise that scholars and writers from various parts of the world still continue to explore the relevance of Gandhi's works and thought in the 21st century. When we discuss Gandhi as the epitome of social reformer, we need to understand his life and journey in South Africa as a young Indian barrister and hardships he faced in that country. He defied the racist regime. His stay in South Africa was crucially important as it was the incident at the railway station in Maritzburg, the capital of Natal, where he was thrown out of the first-class compartment despite possessing a first-class ticket because he was colored man. That made him fight for the removal of color prejudice.
Okay.
I would like to quote what Mahatma Gandhi wrote about the unfortunate incident in his book, My Experiments with Truth. I quote, unquote, I began to think of my duty. Should I fight for my rights or go back to India? Or should I go on to Pretoria without minding the insults and return to India after finishing the case? It would be cowardice to run back to India without fulfilling my obligation. I should try, if possible, to root out the disease and suffer hardships in the process. According to Gandhi, I quote unquote, man is born not to live in isolation, but is essentially a social animal, independent and interdependent. No one can or should ride on another's back. If we try to work out necessary conditions for such a life, we are forced to the conclusion that the unit of society should be self-sufficient in the ideal as a unit and bound together in the bonds of mutual cooperation and interdependence. After his return to India from South Africa in 1915, Mahatma Gandhi traveled the length and breadth of the country to see and study the situation. He realized that the real India lived in villages. He interacted with the masses and tried to understand the rural way of life. Gandhi understood that the real India lived in villages. Of course, India still lives in villages despite the achievements it has made in many fields. Mahatma Gandhi is a rural reformer who fought against untouchability, system, and other evils in the Indian society. He wanted to remove poverty with the participation of the majority of the people, as he had realized that independence had no meaning when the people had no economic freedom. The father of the nation, who led the masses in their freedom struggle, had identified men's greed as the primary cause of trouble. And his ideas help us understand the underlying reality of global citizenship and its various facets by articulating the thoughts of the voiceless multitudes lying dormant in the heart of India, and seek to provide resolutions for building a better society.
Okay, Ma'am Sabita, I'll come back to you. I'll just go to Itanagar, Shri Shiv Shankar Singh Thakur. Good evening, sir.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, sir. A very interesting discussion, the relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's social reforms in this century as we are celebrating his birth anniversary. Now, this has been linked to social work and poverty. However, now it has to be understood in a much broader term when we talk about India in the present status. Your opening remarks, sir.
When we see Mahatma Gandhi in the present scenario, we feel that his relevance is very much there. And when we see, in spite of all the changes and developments, we still feel, could he have been here amongst us to see us all through the problems we are suffering from. He has been a great thinker, philosopher, who while in South Africa saw suffering the people, the way they were oppressed, and after coming back to India, when he saw the majority of the Indians needed his support and guidance, he was moved by the conditions the Indians suffered, especially in the rural India. He had been a man behind what we call non-violence, which he adopted in practice, and he believed that it is only non-violence that can possibly help the mankind in establishing a hatred-free society. So, elaborating this, we find that he was an activist, especially behind the social reforms in India, and he led to many reforms, I should say, starting from the Parda systems, widow marriage. He was against child marriage, and especially untouchability. His concept of Satyagraha, Swaraj, and Sarvodaya is very much relevant in the present context. So he insisted that whatever he thought about India and Indians was to be incorporated in the relevance of the India. Some of his social reforms include eradication of poverty, untouchability. He uplifted highlighting values and truth, for he believed in truth and non-violence.
Okay. Dr. Ravi, I can just hold you there, pause for a while. I'll just go to the next panelist, Shri Ravi Shekhar Vishal. Good evening.
Good evening to one.
Good evening.
One and all.
A beautiful discussion on a very important topic of the impact of Gandhiji's social reforms in the context of this present world. So, your opening remarks, sir.
The making of the Gandhiji as a social reformist started in South Africa only.
Yes.
Where he fought for the civil liberties as well as freedom of expression. With his returning to India and with the moments of Champaran, Kheda and Ahmedabad, his fight for the cause of civil liberties as well as for the freedom of expression further found voice. In the words of Nehruji in 1941, when he described the role of Gandhi, he said, Gandhiji knew India far better than we did. And a man who could command such tremendous devotion and loyalty must have something in him that corresponded to the needs and aspirations of the masses. The movements of Champaran, where he fought for the farmers, in Kheda, where he fought for the peasants, and in Ahmedabad, where he fought for the mill workers. These all things which he fought for here in India showed his visionary approach, his argumentative skills, his oratory skills, his understanding of human values, which increased and later on made him not only a social reformist, but a political reformist, an economic reformist, and his concepts of truth, non-violence, satyagraha, which means holding of the truth, and organized resistance and civil obedience of unjust laws or unjust government, but with non-violence. His thinking on the problems of untouchability, empowerment of women, gender equality were all one of the social reforms measures which he worked on throughout his life. Even his concepts of sarvodaya, that means welfare of all,
Yes.
and antyodaya, that is the welfare of the least, is one of the key philosophical foundations on which even the present government is devising his policies on. So all the policies today which we see has seen its birth from the perspective of Gandhiji. And when we talk about his other reforms, two things which I would like to mention here is his concept of trusteeship.
Okay.
Trusteeship is a principle that was advocated by Gandhiji, which said that it is a freedom of ownership of property in the hands of community and the state, but as a trustee of the masses. It does not rest at providing equal opportunity. It means a way by which a wealthy people would be trustees of trusts that looked after the welfare of the people in general. In short, Gandhiji believed that the wealthy people could be persuaded to part with their wealth to help the poor. He was of the opinion that those who sought to attain God through social service, even if they controlled vast possessions, should not regard any of it as their own. They should rather hold these possessions in trust for the benefit of those less privileged. Here he meant it in terms of both tangible and intangible property, and intangible property which constitutes the labors and talents on whose basis businessmen and other fraternity they develop. So he emphasized that the wealthy should not just claim their possessions to be theirs entirely, as they cannot accumulate their wealth without the labor and cooperation of workers and poorer sections of society. So his concept was an answer to the economic inequalities of ownership and income, a kind of non-violent way of resolving all social and economic conflicts. So this was something that became very important, and it is relevant even today. His reforms have been so fundamental to human life that today also it is relevant, and till the time humanity will prevail, his philosophical foundations, ideas, principles and practices will always be relevant. The basic distinction which gave him the title of Mahatma was that he did not only talk, he walked the talk. He practiced what he preached. So that is one of the reasons why he will always be considered as an epitome of social reformer in India, and he will be followed by everyone.
Okay.
His works have influenced people like Martin Luther King the Jr., even Nelson Mandela, even Barack Obama, and even our present Prime Minister has a great humility and respect for Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay, so I'll just have to wait there. I'll just go to the next panelist. But before that, we are talking about his reforms, Gandhiji. I believe these are groundbreaking formulas that the great Mahatma Gandhi has come at, because there are elements of, understanding the poverty of the people, his focus on his social work, the structure of that society which he would work upon, and how that would be a medium to fit for the social process, which is, according to the conditions, the changes that comes about. And his philosophy as well, which is really, really grounded with reality, not fiction, to really be with the ones who are very poor and underprivileged. Because Rabindranath Tagore says Mahatma Gandhi came and stood at the door of India's destitute millions. So we go to Mizoram. Miss Ruatiki Hmar, good evening.
Good evening.
We are talking about this groundbreaking formula of Gandhiji's Sarvodaya. We are discussing on Gandhi's reform and its relevance in this context of modern India. your opening remarks.
First of all, thank you so much for having me
Okay.
among your panel.
Thank you.
It is a huge opportunity for me to be speaking on this topic on the 161st birth anniversary of Gandhiji. As we know, Gandhiji was a fellow human being who suffered both mentally and physically. Gandhi, as a writer, as an activist, as a reformer, transcending political, social, economic connotations. Gandhi as an ism, that is, as a thought, as a philosophy, as a way of life and code of conduct, till date has captured the hearts and souls of people across the world. What exemplifies Gandhi as a reformer in the past, present, and the years to come, as a reformer in himself and his principle for others, is his deep-rooted belief, bravery, and vision for a new India. An India that is free and equal in every literal sense. An India where we Indians are true humanists. An India that is not divided but united. An India where each Indian is able to enjoy a dignified life. An India which is independent from any external player in terms of wants and needs. And the most beautiful thing about Gandhi is he lived what he preached. He lived his way of life. Gandhi never lost sight of his vision. He was not swayed by fame or popularity. He remained aloof from politically driven initiatives. He never claimed for leadership, nor did he fight for power and authority. He was a simplistic leader and thinker. He was never above or below anyone. He lived for the truth. He was guided by his humanistic thoughts. And he professed for a society of collective individuals who lived and grew as a collective unit in every sphere of life. From his mode of living and teaching alone, we can deduce the nature of social reforms that Gandhiji strongly spearheaded for. Those were reforms towards attainment of equality, freedom, and liberty, reforms that paved the way for ideals of communitarian societies, reforms for universal upliftment, reforms for economic well-being of all, reforms for self-government and autonomy, reforms for peace, care, and respect for all human beings, reforms targeted towards the quest for attainment of capabilities for each self, and reforms for independence and peculiar principles. So that is the uniqueness of Gandhi, and that glorifies him as a social reformer who is so relevant in today's world, because his basic principles and the key words that we link Gandhi with, usually truth, non-violence, ahimsa, sarvodaya, satyagraha, and swaraj. These morals, these teachings, these principles of Gandhi are so clearly reflected in his way of life, in his mode of conduct. So the uniqueness and glorification that Gandhi so deserves as a reformer is his ability to bring multidimensional reforms that challenge the many traditions that have been considered as pillars of the Indian society since ancient times, in the context of the practice of untouchability, the very low status of women, the practice of parda, child marriage, prohibition of widow remarriage. Besides challenging these traditional institutions, he also brought a sense of modernity towards the Indian society, and this modernity was not a westernized model, but one that was driven by self-sustainable ideals. Gandhi said, live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever. So this speaks volumes of the bravery of Gandhi as a reformer, because his bravery stems from his soul, his appreciation and acknowledgement on the need for people to understand the values in learning and education for the creation of a sustainable present and future in terms of economic, social, political, culture, moral, and environmental dimensions.
Okay, we'll go to the next panelist, Shri Shiv Shankar Singh Thakur.
Yes, sir.
Yes. One has caught my attention, which I have fallen in love with one of Gandhiji's reforms, is this perception that he understands a person's plight, the change of heart, one of the concepts. It's so important of his way of constructing India socially. For him, it has to be to understand the level of emotions and feelings of the person, that you really understand the ground reality. Now, this change of heart is one aspect which I would love to have a word with other panelists. So I would like to start with you, sir, on this I believe it's a very noble part of Gandhiji's.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
His change of heart was mainly because of the way Indians were suffering for want of education, for want of guidance. They were suffering from so many evils. and they had no way but to suffer. So Gandhiji was moved by all these factors, and he found that not one Indian, but the majority of Indians in the countryside, they suffered from similar problems, and their problem was unique, and that was one, they were all oppressed from the Britishers in different ways, and that united his feelings with one of the other farmers and other Indians. He particularly saw, while we talk about the Indigo movement in Motihari, when one of the representatives from Motihari came to attend his meeting in somewhere in Gujarat, he saw that he resembled one true peasant from India that could be of any other part of the India. So he was moved by seeing his condition, the way they were suffering, that they were illiterate, that they were oppressed by the Britishers. So this particularly moves me also. What he believed was the reality and was the truth upon which he worked. He not only went to Champaran, but saw the thousands of people across the region, and had to go through even the other official procedures, but he did not obey the order that was issued by the British authority. So that is something very unique in him. And his governing principle also insists that the goals of human freedom and social welfare must be accepted in truth and reality. So, taking this forward, it is about his attitude of mind, it is about his means of life and the practice towards constant search of truth and fight against untruth, fight against violence, and that can be guided by moral and spiritual truth.
This change of heart, very, very beautiful on the part of Gandhiji to understand someone in their state. We talk about empathy. Your opinion on this concept
Yes,
of Gandhiji?
sir. I will quote one instance where one representative of the peasants reached that convention in Gujarat, and Gandhiji asked him to see him in Kolkata convention. And when he reached there in Kolkata, he could easily connect to him and could recall him that he was the very first person.
Yeah.
So he called him privately in the meeting itself and then asked about the problems. He took him in confidence and went on asking about the major problems faced by the peasants in that part of the region. So empathy, as far as empathy is concerned, he was such a brilliant person on catching someone and understanding the whole problem about that. His universal ideology, his attitude to solve political, social, and economic problems, religious problems in the society, it could go to traditional reform through so many ways. He was one who believed that empathy is something which is very essential to understand the common man's heart. So, because he believed all Indians are like him only, he did not make any kind of difference whether he was a man of very high stature or a very low stature.
Okay, so I think we are connecting with Ma'am Sabita. Ma'am, your opinion?
Yes.
Yes, you can continue, yes.
As we are discussing Gandhi, the epitome of social reformer,
Okay.
I would like to mention the problem of gender inequality and crime against women in India.
Okay.
Despite the progress we have achieved in a number of fields, with women making excellent contributions, we have not been able to check crime against women. We understand that Gandhi firmly believed in gender equality and encouraged even his wife, Kasturba Gandhi, and women from all walks of life to participate in the country's freedom movement. India's independence struggle witnessed many women leaders drawn from different parts of the country who actively participated in all kinds of civil disobedience movement. Gandhi wanted that women must realize their full status and play their part as equals of men. He said, there is no school better than home and there is no teacher better than parents. In He said men and women are equal but not identical. Intellectually, mentally, and spiritually, woman is equivalent to a male and she can participate in every activity.
So, okay, we are going to Itanagar. Sir, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we can continue with this change of heart and this approach to people about empathy. And there's one more I would love to stress. One of the strategies that Gandhi used, he stimulates people, he encourages them to work. And after that, he does not let them alone, but he guides them with this, gives them this guidance and teach them the leadership when necessary so that when they are on their own, they can stand on their feet. And in other words, they do what is meant for themselves. This is one of the strategies I would love to discuss with you.
Yes, sir. Well, one example I would give.
Yeah.
In Motihari, Gandhiji saw that the education was not at all there. Okay, in the early 30s. So he, along with his wife Kasturba Gandhi, started working upon establishing center, what we call a school. And he not only personally monitored it, but he and his wife stayed there for over 3 months to supervise everything, ensuring that things are done in a proper way. And he appointed people to look after the things and manage the things properly so that education could go ahead. In that part of the region, education was a far-fetched dream. But due to Gandhiji's efforts only, I can assure you that education is prospering in Motihari district of Bihar. And going further, I would like to give some of my views about him. He believed that without the people are educated, they cannot develop. I mean, their social stature, their personal stature cannot develop as long as the individual is educated.
I'll just go to Aizol, Miss Radhiki Mar. We are talking about this amazing approach of Gandhiji to understand people, stimulate them, encourage them, and he guides them. That's what is so beautiful, because I believe his human side of him is very strong so that he understands people. Your opinion on this aspect, ma'am?
For that answer, I want to share on how Gandhi lived and preached.
Yeah.
We know Gandhi was an advocate of non-violence and thought in action, and he stood for equality of all Indians, transcending caste, creed, sex, race, and gender. So even for propagation towards attaining Swaraj, self-rule for India, Gandhi gave a perfect example of how a nation of diverse people could stand united and firm, of how a nation of different walks of people could fight for a common cause without usage of arms, ammunition, and bring an awakening on the powers and ability that every Indian had to rise above their unjust conditions and attain Swaraj. So I feel like Gandhi had this supernatural philosophy, which was nothing but based on humanistic grounds, where his teachings awakened the minds, souls of hearts and Indians, and this quest played an instrumental part for the removal of social evils, practices that have plagued many sections of Indian society for a very long time. Because the very essence of Gandhi's teaching, the very essence and soul of who Gandhi was, he was just someone who never said his teaching was the absolute truth, but he made sure that his teachings were based on truth values that touched the core essence of every human being. And he touched on principles that each human being were entitled to, but because of the oppressive condition of India in the social sector in our past, many Indians could not connect our rational being with the sort of entitlement which we were supposed to have. So Gandhi, a very simple, a very realistic man, through his simple teaching of teaching us the value of truth, non-violence, and the beauty and power of education, he awoken the spirit among the masses that made them want to fight for their rights in a purely educated manner. So that is the beauty of Gandhiji. He did not profess any big thought or theory, but he just touched on the very core of human essence, which is actually found in almost all religions of the world. That is to show respect and to give a dignified life to our fellow human beings.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your inputs. I'll be coming back to you. I'll just go to Dr. Ravi Shikhar Vishal for his inputs. We are talking about this groundbreaking social reforms as Gandhiji as an epitome. One of his criteria is the goal of social work is to establishment of a classless, non-violent society where there will be no exploitation of a man by man. Simple, austere living and manual labor constitute the personal armory of the Gandhian principles. With a clear set of goals, a code of living and an approach to work, a Sarvodaya worker has to develop his own methods of work which is based on his field experience. So it is essential for us to understand this revolutionary concept which is still relevant for modern India as we are celebrating his anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. His value system has molded the social policy of the government since independence. So we are here in this midst, and Sir Dr. Ravi Shekhar,
Yes, sir.
yeah, your opinion on this aspect.
So you have talked about three things. One was about the empathy, and then we discussed about his participation. And I would like to say that when Gandhiji traveled across India, and when he participated in the movements of Champaran, Kheda, and in Ahmedabad about the mill workers, he understood that there is a lack of awareness among the people. The spirit of fighting is there. But the question is their awareness level regarding what their rights are and how they should proceed to fight against the social evils following the path of ahimsa was critical. And therefore he make it a point that he should always be living among them. You cannot preach anything and think of bringing a change in the society unless and until you are properly involved and are a part of them. So he was a part of them. And that gave motivation to the people to fight, to unite, and work for higher goals in life. So this is how generally in the ashrams that were made by the Gandhi, he always believed that disciplined life is very important. But with such a huge population, to make everybody disciplined was not an easier task. So whoever people were living in his ashram, they had to follow all the physical, philosophical foundations, whether of Sarvodaya, Antyodaya, Satyagraha, all these principles they had to practice in their life. And these are the people who are going to take the leadership role tomorrow, and they are going to guide the whole population how to march forward and to make a better society. So this was one of the works that Gandhiji believed in, and remaining among them, he guided them and helped them to become a better citizen and to work towards a unified society.
Okay, so I'll just go to Itanagar. Sir Shiv Shankar Singh.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a beautiful quote by Gandhi. He says, you have to look at the face of the weakest and the poorest when you do something for them and see whether they are taking charges of their own destiny. Here we are talking about ownership, empowerment, and, giving them that power. Now, in this present context, I understand it's a different world altogether. But you being at the helm of your affairs, you know exactly how relevant it is. Your opinion on this?
It's very relevant still, sir.
Yeah, okay.
And that is the gist of his understanding about the individual, because that is the way. If you find the weakest person is the happiest person, the lowest person is the happiest person, then definitely the society is going in the right direction. So his understanding of the human value, the problems of the individual, he was very sharp in capturing what an individual was feeling at particular moment. So this was very special characteristic in him. He understood things in an individual's perception and could guide him and could very well assess the situation in that regard. And he would go on finding different ways on seeing whether the things are going well in the society and finding out the poorest man, the lowest man to be good. He was the happiest person.
Okay, I'll just go to Manipur. Ma'am Sabita Devi.
Yes.
There's one aspect of one of his social reforms, according to him, when it has to deal with women, for the welfare of women. He says women certainly do social work, but as individuals, he says, I should like them to assume responsibility as a body, you know. So he says that. So he has given them a role, an important role. Now, your personal take on this and understanding from your perspective.
Okay. As we all know, Mahatma Gandhi wanted women to outgrow the traditional responsibilities in participate in the affairs of the nation. And now we understand that women all over the country are taking part besides their traditional responsibilities and making wonderful careers in different fields.
Yeah.
And as we all know, Gandhi criticized India's passion for male progeny.
Okay.
I think it's high time we try to understand what the father of the nation understood from what he saw in the country during the freedom struggle.
Okay.
We all understand that Mahatma Gandhi tried to remove poverty and other social evils like untouchability, bring about a better change in the lives of the million of people in India. Let's hope that his thought, I quote, our greatest ability as humans is not to change the world, but to change ourselves, continues to inspire us to achieve what the father of the nation wanted to see in a free India.
Ma'am, I think we are inching towards the close of this particular program. We wish we had more time. Thank you so much, all our eminent panelists from Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Gangtok, Manipur, all the panelists. Thank you so much, Sri Shiv Shankar Singh Thakur, Ms. Radhiki Mar, Ravi Shekhar Vishal, and Ma'am Sabita Devi. Listeners, it's a beautiful discussion. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, Gandhi says, you must be the change you want to see in the world. And he goes on to say, you must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. The relevance of Gandhi's Sarvodaya in present India, it's still very much relevant. Thank you so much for that discussion, and I'd love to thank some of our friends who have helped here in our studios. We have the engineers on duty, Shri Sushir Chaudhary, assisted by Anthony Kakrang and Ethel Rangslang. Assisted in production is Mumsi Dora Bla, and this program is produced by Evelyn Kongse. This is the Northeastern Service of All India Radio. Thank you so very much. Good night.